All right, so looking at chapter 10 here, integrated resistance training for performance enhancement. So our goals today are to understand general adaptation syndrome. So that's sort of a three-step process you want to be familiar with that talks about like how the body responds and adapts to stress. Um, that general adaptation syndrome, by the way, is a term that definitely comes up often because it is kind of describing like how how human beings sort of like how we are a very adaptable creature that is very good at you know adapting to like our surrounding environments. You get a lot of exposure to the sun, your skin darkens, you get a lot of like exercise, your bones harden, your muscles grow. All of those are kind of examples of like us adapting to things. So if we are talking about like resistance training, the goal is to adapt the body, right? Like that's everything that we're going for. We also want to be able to describe the principle of specificity. So we are going to be talking about how the body actually adapts in sort of three very specific ways, either mechanically, muscularly, or metabolically. We will then talk about resistance training and how to apply like the different phases to that, and talk a little bit about like how to choose appropriate exercises depending on who our client is. So first thing we're going to talk about is called the SAID principle or the principle of specificity. I don't know if this is another example of NASM being kind of inconsistent. They will call it one or the other. I'm not sure which version you will see, but they will call it one of these things. They will either say it's the principle of specificity or they'll say it is the SAID principle. And so basically what the principle of specificity says is that your body will adapt specifically to whatever demands you place upon it. So if you are trying to get better at endurance, well, then doing sprints might not necessarily help you. If you're trying to get better at sprints, well, then a long 4-mile run might not exactly help you. So the reason we call it SAID is it stands for specific adaptations to imposed demands, right? So your body will adapt only in the ways that you tell it to adapt. It has no reason to get better at something that it is not being exposed to, right? We were just having this conversation last night in the evening class for some of you who were there. Robert was asking, he's trying to get his mile run. He's like, if you wanted to like, if you had like an athlete who's trying to get better at sprints, but they also wanted to get better at like a 1 mile run, how would you train for that? And I was like, honestly, those are two very, 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 very different things to train for. Like I would train to get my client better at the mile during their off season because it doesn't apply to most athletics. Don't get me wrong, like, I ran like 4.5 miles yesterday during like the ultimate games that I was playing. You're definitely going to put in the miles. Um, but like you are never running like a slow, medium paced mile at any time, pretty much in any sport, unless it is like, that sport is track running or, a marathon, cross country. But like no sort of field sport or court related sport is related to running a mile. So I wouldn't train my athlete for it, because I don't want to spend training time focusing on getting the body to adapt to something that is not related to the sport that I'm training for. So when we say the SAID principle, right, we talk about how the body is going to train and get better at whatever you expose it to. So you lift heavier weights, you're going to gain maximal strength, not endurance. If you lift lighter weights, well, then you're going to gain endurance, not maximal strength. So this is why we have so many different phases when we're talking about like the OPT model, right? This is why we have different levels of training. And then within those levels, you can see we have different phases as well. By the way, we are not getting quite into phases today. I mean, we will a little bit. Hold on a second. Whoa. We are going to primarily be talking about the levels today still. Until we get to the actual like program design part of the course, today we're getting the resistance section. That's still very level based because we're going to be talking about like exercise selection, not necessarily like full on like repetition schemes and stuff. So anyway, we'll come back to that later. Now, just because we are saying that we want to adapt specifically to, whatever phase, it doesn't justify skipping any phases of the OPT model. Like if you've got like a power lifter, right? And they're like, well, I'm concerned with these two phases right here. This is what I care about, right? That doesn't mean you are going to skip building a foundation of stabilization. You do want to make sure your client knows how to squat properly before you try to make them squat for super intense maximal loads. So the three pieces of the principle of specificity, right? We've got three sort of key aspects. When it comes to like what we consider, there's sort of three things here. There is mechanical specificity, which is basically meaning that like one of the part of that you are considering are the weights and the movements that are required by the body. So for instance, like if, Jerica told me she wanted to like improve her vertical jump, right? I know that she is trying to improve, the power in her legs. So when it comes to mechanical specificity, the weight that I'm going to pick is a combination of heavy and lightweight. And then the movements are going to be leg-based exercises, right? So the weights and the movements. If an individual wants to develop maximal strength in their chest, then they should perform heavy chest-based exercises, right? Now, the next part of the principle of specificity is to consider the neuromuscular specificity, right? The neuromuscular specificity is the speed of contraction and the exercise selection. Now, exercise selection is different than movements. Movements is body part based. Exercise selection is, well, should I do a chest machine? Should I do a chest with dumbbells? Should I do a chest with barbells? Should I do it on a stability ball? Right? Like you're choosing like which version of a chest exercise you're going to pick. So neuromuscular specificity is the speed and the exercise selection. So again, if we have a client who wants to develop maximal strength in their chest, well, they want to perform, they should perform explosive contractions, maximal strength in a stable environment. We should never be lifting for maximal strength in an unstable environment because that focuses primarily on micro muscles rather than on macro muscles, right? Unstable exercises have a lot of wiggling involved, which is really good for all the little tiny stabilizers. It's not so good for maximal prime mover strength. So going, again, looking at like if Jerica told me she wanted to improve her vertical, right? I would pick heavy and explosive leg exercises. And then the leg exercises would perform at an explosive tempo neuromuscularly, and I would do them in a stable environment neuromuscularly. And lastly, we've got the metabolic.
I'm sorry, what's a stable environment again?
Like the floor, like your feet are on the ground, right? Rather than like stand. You remember the AirX pad and the Dynadisc and like the half foam roller, all those squishy, like, unstable, like wobbly pieces of equipment I was talking about on the balance day. I would pick versions like that, or I would pick two-legged exercises instead of one-legged. So yeah, like a stable environment would be like two legs on the ground instead of like one leg while standing on like a half foam pad, you know? So that's neuromuscularly. And then metabolically, it's the energy demand of the exercise. Okay, so metabolic specificity is the energy demand based on how I'm going to apply these exercises that I picked from earlier. So if an individual wants to develop maximal strength in their chest, right, like our example, our guy here, they're going to pick low repetitions. They're going to do a high number of sets, and they are going to take a maximal amount of rest. So because they are lifting so heavy, I want to make sure that there is plenty of fuel in the tank every single set. I'm going to need to do multiple sets in order to give them enough exposure to the exercise, because like they're not getting 10 repetitions a set. They're only getting maybe 3 or maybe 5 repetitions a set. So I may need to do more sets in order to make up for that lack of repetitions. So they're going to do a low number of reps. a high number of sets and a maximal amount of rest. The rest is going to make sure that they, are getting plenty of refueling done in between sets. So for my vertical example, if you're trying to like improve your vertical jump, I'm also probably going to do a low number of reps that are very explosive. Probably still do a high number of sets and probably still take a maximal amount of rest. Power and maximum strength are very, very similar. So let's give it a complete opposite example here. Let's look at all three of these one more time and flip it around. Let's say I've got a client who wants to improve their stability, balance, and endurance, right? Well, then I'm probably going to pick, when it comes to mechanical specificity, let's say that's total body stuff, right? They want to improve total body endurance and stuff. Then I'll probably pick a total body exercise, right? And so I will pick total body exercises that are working a lot of muscles simultaneously. That's going to be a really good way to work on my endurance. And then mechanically, because they are going for endurance, the weight that I'm going to pick is going to be pretty light. Then neuromuscularly, I'm probably going to pick very unstable exercises. So I'm probably going to put them on like their back against, instead of putting their back against the wall, maybe I put it against the stability ball. Maybe I put their feet on like BOSU balls, right? Something that makes the exercise unstable, or maybe I make them do like a single leg version. And then I'm going to have them, rather than moving explosively, the speed of contraction is going to be pretty slow because they're going for endurance, right? So I'm probably going to have them do like a really long eccentric deceleration, maybe get like a little pause in there, and then they can, move through that range of motion. So the speed of contraction is going to be slow. The exercise selection is going to be unstable. And metabolically, I'm probably going to have them do a high number of repetitions, which means I'm going to do a low number of sets, and then I'm going to take a minimal amount of rest, and keep it like relatively short so that they keep working the entire time. So two very different kind of spectrums here. Now, memorizing these things, I think is really, and like understanding these concepts, I think is really important. I don't think you'll be tested on them that often. You will see like what the said principle is in your homework, and you might get a question about like what's the difference between metabolic and neuromuscular and things like that. And knowing the definitions is fine. The weight and the movements, the speed of contraction and exercise selection, the energy demand. But like, does this necessarily have to apply to every client that you train? I don't know, not necessarily, because what's nice is NASM has actually taken all of this information. Like the reason we're even studying this right now, the reason we're looking at it is because if you wondered until now, I've talked a lot about the OPT model. If you have wondered like why we have all these rules, and I was like, look, if you got a client who's in stabilization, what makes someone a stabilization client, or what makes someone a strength endurance client? All these kind of rules here, NASM based all of these rules on these physiologic principles. So like you will notice that like mechanically for stabilization in clients, it's pretty lightweight. And then you will notice that metabolically down here, it's pretty high reps. And you will notice that neuromuscularly, it's very unstable. And then as we go up the OPT model, everything kind of flips to the exact opposite. Like the higher you get up the OPT model, we go from mechanical specificity that's light to mechanical specificity that's heavy. We go from unstable to very stable. We go from high repetitions to low repetitions. So NASM has done all of this work for you, but it's like knowing the story behind why something is the way it is. I think always gives you a deeper meaning, gives you a deeper understanding of like, and a deeper level of importance for how to like write actual effective programs for our clients. So I like to spend some time on this, even though it's not necessarily, if you were to simply categorize your clients by stabilization, strength, endurance, hypertrophy, max strength or power, if you were to just simply say, you're this type of client, and look in the book and look in the chart and copy and paste all the numbers into their workout, you would come out with a pretty darn good workout.
Time intensity rest.
But like I think that like knowing this, the why behind these things is always going to give you a deeper understanding. So we got a lot of principles, by the way. Today there's going to be a lot of principles. There's a lot of like bold followed by definitions, a lot of notes today. But it is simpler than you think it will be. So the next principle we got to look at, like when we're talking about like, you know, training a person, getting their body to adapt to stuff, is the principle of overload. So the principle of overload is going to state that like in order to adapt to a stressor, the tissues that you are training need to be exposed to a stimulus that is greater than they can handle. Big fancy way of saying tissues need to be overloaded in order to experience adaptation. Your muscles will get stronger because you're going to go try to lift something that's really heavy and your body's going to go, holy crap, we sucked at that. You know, like I was not good at that. You know, like it'll go, oh man, I need to get stronger. I need to develop, you know, more bone density and deeper muscle tissue. I need to develop more mitochondria. You know, like it's going to figure out, you know, it's going to respond to the stress. Just like, you know, if, you know, at the beginning of the summer every year, at some point I get like a kind of a minor sunburn, you know, like I go outside and it's like, well, weather's officially changing. And then like I get sort of the summer tan, you know, like that's the body being exposed to a certain level of stress so that it can adapt. Don't tan that much, by the way. Oregon fully blooded, stuck this way. But that is what we're talking about. We talk about the principle of overload. Your tissues need to be overloaded in order to experience adaptation. So there's a lot of ways that we manipulate numbers through program design in order to experience this adaptation or to experience this overload, right? We can overload by manipulating your training volume. Maybe you do the exact same routine 1 month to the next, but you simply double the volume, right? So like your workout is like, hey, we're going to do, you know, 3 sets of 8 repetitions for week 1, 3 sets of 8 repetitions for week 2. Then we're in order to make sure that we're like continue manipulating variables and continue overloading the body. Now that your body's kind of gotten a little bit used to things, now we're going to do 4 sets of 8 repetitions. So we're not changing the energy demand, we're just changing the volume, right? They still get plenty of rest in between sets. They're still fresh, but now they have to do an extra set on everything. That's going to lead to more training volume, could lead to a deeper stimulation or a deeper overload. We can do it with intensity. We could say like, you know, we've been lifting for 5 sets of 5 repetitions for this routine. We're going to keep that the same for all 4 weeks, but you're going to lift it, you know, 80% of your 1 rep max for week 1, 82.5% of your 1 rep max for week 2. Like maybe we raise up the weight, right? That's one way to overload the body. That's the way that everybody kind of jumps to, right? But it doesn't have to always be weight based, right? I can also like limit your rest. I can raise the instability. I can put you on something wobbly, which would make it unstable, right? There's a lot of ways to overload the body and introduce new ways, new types of stress. And that's the principle of overload. But the principle is like, you need to, you know, if your client goes to the, like, I always tell my clients this, how do I always say this? Going to the gym doesn't do anything. Working out at the gym does, right? Like you'll see those people who go to the gym religiously. They get on the treadmill, they open their magazine, they stick it on the little thing or whatever, and they just like walk for 20 minutes or a half hour, and they're just reading their magazine and they're walking at like a really low pace. There's never a moment like at that point that their body is actually being like overloaded. Their body is used to the stress that's being applied to it, right? So at that point, like they're not actually experiencing the principle of overload. Their body has no reason to adapt, right? And that's why so many people experience like plateaus and things like that, right? Their body gets used to things. So that's one of the reasons why we also have our next concept, which is the principle of variation. This is one that's not in your regular book, by the way. You're not going to see this definition anywhere else. This is just in the sports book, but it is important. So principle of variation is that, look, like variations are really essential to continue experiencing adaptation. Again, we are very adaptable creatures. If your body gets used to something, it will adapt to it, and it has no reason to, adapt any further unless you give it like a new stimulation. Again, it's just like I asked you guys, do you think it's, easier? Do you think walking is easier now that you're an adult? Because I don't think walking is easier. I think walking is actually arguably harder now because you have a much larger body. But the difference is you are very good at it at this point, right? So walking isn't really going to overload your body as much as it used to when you were like an infant, and that's where we need like variations to make that harder, right? Maybe go walking on the sand or something. Might be something that if you've never done it before, your body is going to have to adapt and get used to. So little things like that. That's the principle of variation. It also, so it's going to lead to definitely like superior improvements. It is also going to be really important when it comes to variation to prevent injury. So making sure that we're not doing like maximal intensity for too long to where eventually maybe the body can't keep up and keep adapting, and then all of a sudden it breaks down. We don't want to experience that, right? So that's again where variation comes in. The big way that we describe the big way that we take advantage of the principle of variation is through a concept called periodization. Okay, so periodization is where you are doing like a blend of different training techniques over the course of like a certain time period. So I looked this up the other day. I found this like kind of interesting chart because someone was saying they're talking about like doing hypertrophy. Like what would happen if you trained literally for, muscle gain for an entire year? And I was like, if you stayed in the hypertrophy phase for an entire year, your body is probably going to adapt. But then I just happened to be kind of Googling around and I found this kind of interesting article that showed like what a cycle for a bodybuilder would be like over the course of an entire year with their training and their nutrition. So they've got like 4 months of hypertrophy training. And then they are in a building phase when it comes to nutrition. So they're eating in a calorie surplus. Then they do a little bit of maximum strength training in month 5, where they're lifting really heavy, trying to kind of cement up all that new muscle that they've gained. And they eat a little bit less than they did before at their maintenance level. So here's a calorie surplus. Then they're at maintenance during the strength side of things. And then I'm not 100% certain what performance hypertrophy is, but I'm assuming it's slightly different variations. It says that they are on a fat loss routine here. So if I were to, assume something, I would say this is probably like a NASM style strength endurance routine. Then they've got a little bit more hypertrophy where they do a little bit of reverse dieting. That's actually where they start to slowly amp the calories back up. And then they have a little bit more strength there at the end in a maintenance phase. Do I think this is the greatest like routine in the world? Not really. But if I were to like lay this out and like make it look like a NASM program, this is where we use NASM sort of periodized sort of setup here. So we're not gonna pay too much attention to the monthly, weekly stuff right now, but just take a look up here in the yearly section, right? If I were to kind of follow this scheme right here, again, you should always start your clients in stabilization. So I don't necessarily think this is the greatest routine in the world, but basically we know hypertrophy is phase 3, right? So they do what, 4 months of phase 3. So 1, 2, 3, 4. They do a month of max strength. So that's phase 5. Then they go back to performance hypertrophy, which I would assume because they're on fat loss probably means strength endurance. So 4 months there of strength endurance. That's going to be phase 2, 2 more months of hypertrophy, and 1 month of max strength. So this is kind of how they have it laid out for their client in this example right here. Again, I don't think it's the greatest workout in the world. I want to be really clear about that, but I do really like this as an example for class. Now, let's say you're training an athlete, right? And this is just an athlete who's generally trying to stay in good shape. let's not worry about the off season. They're an amateur athlete. They're a weekend warrior, right? Well, if that's the case, they want to have pretty good strength. They want to have pretty good power, right? So maybe our routine looks something like this. They have like, build them up in stabilization first, develop their endurance because that's a big component of athletics, and then take them into like power training, which is also a really big component of athletics. And so we literally just go 1, 2, 5, 1, 2, 5, 1, 2, 5. And it looks something kind of like this. We put them in phase 1 for January, phase 2 for March, jump to phase 5 for January to March, brain fart. Phase 1 in January, strength endurance. Oh my God, I did it again. Phase 1 in January, phase 2 in February, phase 5 in March, and then just repeat 1, 2, 5, 1, 2, 5, 1, 2, 5. That wouldn't be bad, right? What if I've got a client who just wants to burn as many calories as possible? Well, I would argue that the 2 best calorie burners are phases 1 and 2. So maybe it just looks like this: 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. That's enough variation to keep your client moving. It's a great way to burn plenty of calories. And it's a great way to ensure that like you're not overstressing your clients at any point. So that's sort of what we mean when we say periodization. I'm going to give you a much better lesson on that. I think tomorrow, actually. I'm really excited to get to tomorrow. I love the periodization day. Yeah, so we're doing it tomorrow. So we're going to spend more time on this concept tomorrow because I love setting up like full years. It's a super fun thing to do. And I love to do that in front of my clients, actually. Even during like the sales pitch, I will sometimes lay that out. And then they're like, wow, this person who just met me has my entire year planned. I definitely want to hire them, So that's a big one. Here's another one that's not in your book. And honestly, like, I didn't even put this in your notes. The next principle is the principle of individualization. And basically that means that you should design programs in order to meet your client's individual needs. You should consider their age, you should consider their medical history, their training background, and whatever sport it is. I think that that's actually really obvious. I think that if you are applying the said principle and you are being specific to your client already, you will be doing the principle of individualization. But that's what we're saying there. All right. Oh man, I'm gonna sneeze again. Don't do it. Don't do it, brain. All right, so the next one we've got is the general adaptation syndrome. So the next thing that we're gonna look at, general adaptation syndrome, is actually, again, this is not a NASM concept. Like if I look up general adaptation syndrome here, you'll see probably lots of charts on the internet kind of describing this. But basically, it's known as GAS. It describes sort of how our bodies respond and adapt to specific types of stress, okay? So describes how the body adapts to stress, right? So this is sort of a 3-step process. And you can kind of see here, right, sort of how that 3-step process works. If you give yourself a certain amount of stress, your body actually goes into freak out mode at first. And so it actually decreases a little bit in the beginning. This is why you're super sore and why sometimes you get a little stiff. It might be hard to work out. But then your body goes, all right, apparently we're going to keep doing like freaking exercise now. So then it resists that, right? It develops a resistance to it. So then it develops like some new strength, which is exactly what we're going for. But if you continue giving it too much stress, what might end up happening is you might up in the exhaustion phase, and then this is going to dip really low. And that's where you're actually going to maybe experience like an injury. So general adaptation syndrome is a 3-step process that describes how we adapt to stress. The first part is the initial alarm reaction. This is the initial reaction to whatever stressor you happen to be placing on it, right? Like me, I did a new leg routine Tuesday, and today I am in the 7th freaking circle of sore. Very, 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 very sore today. So alarm reaction is the initial reaction. DOMS, or delayed onset muscle soreness, that's how, you ever notice how you're sore the next day after a workout, but then you're really sore the next day? That's DOMS. That's delayed onset muscle soreness. It's kind of a phenomenon that we don't fully understand actually. But it's the initial reaction to a stressor, right? Or it could be in the actual moment that you even lift a super heavy weight. So for instance, like let's say you've got a super heavy barbell in your hand and you're trying to lift it up off the ground, your body goes, whoa, that's some heavy weight. And then it just turns your nervous system on like crazy and your whole nervous system lights up. Maximal motor units being recruited, right? That's also an example of an alarm reaction, right? It's the initial response to a stressor. Usually that will sometimes lead to a slight decrease in performance in like the first week or two. But after that, your body starts to go, okay, apparently we're going to keep getting exposed to this freaking stress. So I am going to adapt to it. I am going to respond to that in kind and, you know, be more resistant to damage, right? So we have our resistance development, where this is an increase in your functional capacity to whatever stressor you were being exposed to. So your body develops greater strength because you lifted really heavy weight. That's a really good example of what we're talking about here, right? So that's resistance development. So your alarm reaction is the initial reaction where your body kind of freaks out. And then the resistance development is your body's response to that stressor. If you lift weights consistently, your body goes, man, you keep tearing down all my muscle. Like I just repaired all this crap, you know, like, all right, well, if you're going to keep tearing it down, I'm going to build it up and make it more resistant to damage in the future. So then it develops a resistance. And then we raise the weight and suddenly it gets torn down again and your body goes, knock it off. And then it just gets stronger and stronger and stronger over time. But there is also like, if you continue to, you know, apply stress without like taking a break, without any variation, with no approach to periodization here, you may experience exhaustion, which is prolonged stress causes staleness, which is like a plateau, or an injury. So you might plateau in the gym with your weight loss because your body says, nope, I'm used to this. This isn't stressful anymore. I'm not worried about this. I have no reason to tap into that body fat, right? Or maybe it's like, hey, you've been training for maximum strength for a couple of weeks and like, yeah, you've gotten stronger, but maybe your connective tissue can't keep up. So now you're experiencing like a muscle strain or a tear or something like that, you know? Like I did a pretty heavy powerlifting routine at the beginning of this year, trying to increase my 1 rep max on my deadlift and my squat. And I did, which was really cool. And I was really happy about it. I got to the very, very end of the routine. I was doing like a really heavy 8-week routine. I got to the very end of it. And, literally I knew that I was feeling like exhausted. I was like, man, like I've only got like 3 days left in this routine. I'm not even sure I'm gonna make it. I might need to go on like a deload week and recover and relax early. But I was like, I've only got 2 workouts left. So I did it on Thursday and I was like, man, and I felt like I was like pushing the line. And then like did the Friday workout and I was like, oh my God. And I was fine. I didn't pull a muscle, I didn't strain anything. And I was like, I made it. I made it through the whole routine. And I went and played my ultimate game the next day, which is something I always do. And I pulled my hamstring. So I just, you know, prolonged stress. It was just a little bit too much. You know, didn't listen to my body, didn't take the time to kind of recover and stuff. So, you know, I definitely experienced some resistance development. I PR'd on every one of my 1 rep maxes, heaviest I've ever lifted before. But like, you know, there's the initial alarm reaction. I was really sore for the first couple of weeks. Then I started to develop resistance. And then I got exhausted towards the end. I was run down, you know, and started feeling that. So that is another reason why planned variation is essential. You can see they're saying it, you know, they just said that like, planned variation is essential. They say it twice. It's very important, right? We need to make sure that we have this sort of periodized approach where, you know, we are sort of going up and down with things, right? So if you think of like, you know, ending up in like stream, we don't want to even get into this last exhaustion phase, right? We want to go from here and then give us like a new alarm reaction and kind of reset our general adaptation. This is where in the world of powerlifting, you have what is called a deload week, which is basically where you reduce your training volume just a little bit. And by reducing that training volume a bit, you are giving your body a minute to adapt and kind of respond, calm down a little bit, and then you can kind of go back into maybe a heavy lifting. So, I think you should deload every, 4 to 6 weeks, basically. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of our progressive outcomes, AKA let's look at the OPT model here, right? So there's a couple different there's obviously not a couple, there's a lot of different the ways the body can adapt. If your client is in the stabilization level, let me pull up the OPT just because I need a visual aid. If we look at the OPT model here, and this is sort of like, all of its individual like levels, right? We've got the stabilization level. Well, your primary adaptation here is the development of greater stability, right? You are going to teach your body how to adapt and, hold your joints in the positions they are supposed to be held in, right? Adaptations focus on dynamic support and maintenance of posture. So you're trying to learn how to hold your body in a specific position. I always tell people, like, stabilization is not even so much about movement. It's about learning how to resist unwanted movement, right? So those are your stabilization level adaptations. But then what if you move into the strength level, right? So if we move it, and by the way, like in the strength level, the beginning of that is the strength endurance phase. Now, by the way, in stabilization, you will notice that they actually call the phase stabilization endurance. The only reason they do that is because it is a very high number of repetitions. It's a minimum of 12 and a maximum of 20 repetitions in this phase. So because that is a lot, that is considered an endurance sort of training situation. So we have the stabilization endurance, then we have the strength endurance, which is sort of where you're just transferring out of stability into strength. Both of these are very endurance based. So that's where we sort of start most of our clients. We focus on stability and muscle endurance, right? Stabilization is more about like joint stability. Strength endurance is more about like, muscle endurance, right? Muscle endurance adaptations focus on maintaining high levels of force production over extended periods of time. We've also got, what if you got a client who wants to just get bigger? Well, that's where hypertrophy comes in. The adaptations that we're focused on are the development of muscular size, right? So hypertrophy, which would be phase 3, is all about growing our muscles as large as we can get them. Then we've got clients who are developing for maybe maximal strength, right? Well, maximum strength is literally adaptations in order to be able to produce as much force within our muscles, generate the greatest amount of tension within our muscles to overcome some external stimulus as possible, right? So adaptations focused on the development of muscular tension in order to overcome external forces is sort of our definition there. That's the maximum strength phase. Like, hey, I want you to lift this really freaking heavy thing, I don't know, once, literally it's raising your 1 rep max, right? So that is the maximum strength level. And then what about power, right? We've got clients who might want to have like power adaptations. Well, power adaptations focus on generating the greatest amount of force. So kind of similar to max strength, but doing it in the shortest amount of time possible. And so that's where the power comes in. So again, force times velocity equals power, right? So we're getting half the equation from the force side of things. We're getting half the equation from the velocity side of things. And that increases our overall power output. So clients who are in the 5th phase there. So those are sort of the 5 very general ways that our body will adapt. Obviously, your body adapts in a lot of freaking ways, right? But this is a pretty good example of like what we're seeing in terms of like, our main adaptations. So that's phase 1, phase 2, 3, and 4, and phase 5. Now you will notice like what's funny about this PowerPoint, Nassim's actually not necessarily talking about phases here. They're just talking about progressive outcomes, but those outcomes align directly with the OPT model, and they're supposed to, you know. That's why the OPT model was created. Now, any questions so far on the OPT stuff? Questions, comments, concerns? How are we feeling, class? Nobody? Nothing? All righty. So let's take a look at our resistance training systems here. Now, these training systems are basically ways that you can apply these different types of stress, okay? So the first one we're gonna look at is a single set system. Single set system is basically where you do one set per exercise. So like, this is really effective for beginning clients and clients who are in the stabilization level. And it literally is like, you know, all right, you're gonna do this, and then that's that for the day. You're gonna do that, that's it for the day. That one, that one, that one. You probably set them up in a circuit and they just kind of go through it one time. Really good for exposing new clients. And honestly, it can actually be enough stress in the beginning, you know? So even if you were to just say, hey, I want you to do, you know, keep it really simple. Let's say it's at home, right? A little bit of like push-ups, sit-ups, and squats, right? In the beginning, even just starting with one set of each of those things per day could be enough for your client to experience some adaptation. But as they get a little bit more used to it, and general adaptation syndrome, right, as they start to adapt and they develop, you know, they have resistance development and they're no longer, you know, that's no longer stressful enough. Well, that's where a multi-set system comes in. So multiple set systems, it's like, okay, well now I want you to do 3 sets of 20 repetitions of push-ups, sit-ups, and squats, right? Now they're getting multiple sets per time. There's ways to goof around with your sets. There are pyramid systems for those of you who are kind of used to this. This is probably much more applied for max strength purposes than anything. Like generally pyramids work really well in max strength and power. Sometimes they can be applied to hypertrophy pretty well, but generally like these are the 2 phases where pyramids are really effective. And a pyramid is either going light to heavy or heavy to light. So the classic pyramid is going light to heavy. It is where you would get on a bench or a squat or a deadlift or whatever, and you'd be lifting and like you would do your first set. Let's say you're doing 4 to 6 sets, right? So if I'm doing 6 sets, I would do my first set for, you know, let's say 6 repetitions, right? And then we would add a little bit of weight and I would do my second set for maybe 5 repetitions, add a little bit of weight, do my third set for 4 repetitions, add a little bit of weight, right? So the weight goes up and the reps go down. I go from a lightweight to a heavyweight. There's also the reverse pyramid, which I think is actually a little bit more effective. If you are going for hypertrophy, it's a little bit more effective. And that's heavy to light. You would lift, you know, really heavy, get as many repetitions as you can, rack it, you would rest, and while you're resting, take some of the weight off, do your next set, take some of the weight off, do your next set. And so the weight goes down and the reps go up. You're trying to increase your reps every set. Now, for the record, pyramids have rest in between each set. This is not a drop set system, which we're going to look at here in just a second. Drop sets are where you don't take any rest. So if I were doing like, if I grabbed like a set of dumbbells and I was doing like bicep curls, right? And it gets really heavy and I can't do any more and I have to drop it. And I put the weights down and immediately I grab a lighter pair and keep going. That's called a drop set, okay? And that's yeah, I could do 1 drop or 2 drops. Any more than that, I don't need to do. That's drop setting. Pyramiding is different. Pyramiding is you're doing a full set, you rest, then you either lower or raise the weight. So it involves rest. Drop setting does not. There is also supersetting. Supersetting is definitely probably the most common thing that we will use. This is performing 2 exercises in rapid succession with little to no rest in between. So if you did a dumbbell chest press, and you paired that up with a bent over row, and you didn't take any rest, right? You get done with your chest press, you immediately turn around and you do your bent over row, right? That is a superset. And you can take rest afterwards, right? You can take rest after the second exercise. But like, you know, exercise 1 followed immediately by exercise 2, that is a superset. Now, really quickly, I want to address Lorianne and Thomas. For now, that's what I want you to think of when I think of superset, okay? 2 exercises, back to back, no rest. Tomorrow, though, I'm going to throw a curveball at you. And for the rest of you guys, you've heard this before. You might be familiar with what we call a NASM strength endurance superset. The definition of superset is just 2 exercises back to back. Okay, that's the end of that sentence. But the way that NASM uses supersets in phase 2 is you do a strength movement first and a stabilization movement second. So it's got an extra rule there, and they have to be for the same body part. So that's also an extra rule. So instead of doing like a chest press plus a bent over row, you would do like a chest press plus like a single leg push-up, and that would be chest to chest. So it's kind of blending. So NASM takes the concept in phase 2 of a superset, and they blend it with the idea of a drop set. So you're basically like pushing yourself, you get to the end of the set and you're done. Oh wait, you got to keep going, right? And that's where that's why it's called strength endurance, because it's like, I'm done. It's like, guess what? You're not, you know. We'll see that more tomorrow, actually. And these are great. We love supersets. Supersets are really popular in hypertrophy workouts. Arnold Schwarzenegger was a firm believer in supersets. He was all about what are called agonist-antagonist supersets, which are kind of a unique variation. He was all about pairing up joint actions in opposite directions. So he would do like a shoulder press, right? And then he would superset that with pull-ups, which would basically look the same joint action wise, but be for an antagonist. So his shoulder press was for his deltoids and his pull-ups were for his lats. Or he would do a chest press plus a row, right? He was a really, really big proponent of that. He loved that sort of superset technique. And he was huge. So, you know, it's probably good for hypertrophy. Now, I'd say the other most common thing that we'll do is circuit training. Circuit training is where you are going to do a series of exercises with limited to no rest in between each exercise. So circuit training would be an example of doing, like let's say you do your chest press and then you set the dumbbells down and immediately go into some body weight squats. And then immediately, once you're done with your body weight squats, you go into maybe like a step up to balance. And then immediately from there, you go into like a shoulder press. And immediately from there, you go into some calf presses or something, right? Like that's a circuit or circuit training. It is a series of exercises, usually a minimum of 4 with little to no rest in between. So a lot of times you'll see like, pictures online, these sort of at-home circuits, and they're almost always, you know, drawn in charts like this, where it's like you do your squats, push-ups, jumping jacks, lunges, plank, side lifts. Repeat, right? And there you go. That's your circuit. So don't take any rest in between each of these. But once you get to the end of your circuit, if you want to take a little bit of rest, you can, you know. You can rest once you're done with everything. Here's the no nonsense circuit. I don't know what that means, but you know, jumping jack squats, squat jumps, lunges, burpees, push-ups, mountain climbers, crunches, planks, repeat 3 times, you know? So that's sort of your classic example of like circuit training there. Here's a fun one. This is 3 individual circuits here. Push-ups, lateral hops, bicycle crunches. Then you have a different circuit. The next after that, side kicks, Russian twist, glute bridges, lunge. I don't know. This is okay, I guess. But that's what we're seeing, right? Like that's kind of your classic circuit training. For the record, there is a variation of circuit training, which is really popular, called peripheral heart action training. This is something we'll talk more about. Actually, I guess Thomas and Lorianne, this will be your final mod. We'll come back to this concept, but we talk about it with a lot of clients. Peripheral heart action is a variation of circuit training where when you're setting up your circuit, you have to make sure you are alternating from upper body exercises down to lower body, back to upper body, down to lower body. And so there's sort of an additional sort of rule in your circuit here. Again, circuit training is just multiple exercises in a row, no rest. Peripheral heart action circuit training is multiple exercises in a row with no rest that are alternating between upper and lower body. So you would do like a shoulder press, then squats, then bicep curls, then lunges, then a chest press, then a deadlift, then a row, then a calf raise, right? Upper, lower, upper, lower, upper, lower. And by doing that, you are evenly distributing blood in your body. This is a very, very, very effective method for training clients who have cardiovascular problems, particularly hypertension. So if you have a client with high blood pressure, this is a really, really effective way to train because you are basically like, hey, I'm sending my blood up here. And then it's like, nope, just kidding, sending it down here. And then, nope, I lied, it's coming back up here. And so you're actually training your blood vessels to evenly distribute blood, which will generally affect your blood pressure in really positive ways. It'll lower your blood pressure over time. Now, aside from everything we've been talking about, now, do you set your workouts up as just hitting every muscle in the body every single time you work out? You can do that. Or you can train different body parts on different days. And that is what we refer to as a split routine system, or sometimes you'll hear people call this your training split. There's a lot of different training splits out there. There's push-pull splits, there's upper-lower splits, right? So here's like the kind of classic push-pull legs, right? Monday, you would do your chest, shoulders, and triceps. Tuesday, you would do your back and your biceps. Wednesday, you would do your legs. Thursday, chest, shoulders, triceps. Friday, back and biceps. Saturday, legs. So that's a push-pull leg routine. This is sort of a classic in the world of like bodybuilding and strength training. It's pretty good. There's also the 5-day split. You have, oh, this is kind of an interesting one. You have upper strength day, which is like your entire upper body. And then you have lower strength day. That's your entire lower body. Then you have a push day, a pull day, and a leg day. And these are, you know, low repetition days up here because this is all about strength. These are high repetitions down here. They're a little bit about endurance. So now you're kind of blending different levels of the OPT together. So we've got chest, back, legs. We have upper, lower splits. Right now I'm on an upper, lower split. So I have upper body on Monday, lower body on Tuesday, cardio on Wednesday, upper body again on Thursday. So Mondays and Thursdays are the same. Lower body again on Friday. So it goes upper, lower cardio, upper, lower cardio. And that's what my week looks like. It could also be the bro split, which is a very unofficial term. But if you look at the bro split workout, this is kind of what got popular for a really long time in the world of weight training. But it's like chest day, arm day, Netflix. Okay, sorry, I didn't realize I pulled up a funny one. That's so funny. That's supposed to be leg day. But it became Netflix. That's really funny. Split example. So yeah, it would be chest, back, shoulders, arms and abs, or no, legs and abs, and then arm day. Arm day gets its own day. I don't think you need an arm day, personally. I'm not a big fan of having an entire day dedicated to arms. I think that's kind of silly, but that's your classic sort of, we call it the bro split as a joke, because only bras do it. But yeah, so that's a split routine system. You could also just do total body every day. You know, if you did like a total body workout on Monday and another total body workout on Wednesday and another total body workout on Wednesday or Friday, right? That's also really effective. Nothing wrong with that. So a lot of different ways you can do this, guys. There's a million different splits out there. Again, we're going to talk about this more tomorrow when we look at periodization. And then lastly, there is the difference between vertical loading and horizontal loading. And basically, vertical loading is where you're going to work your way down the OPT model like this. So if I had a workout set up like this, let's say I did a chest press and then squats and then a bent over row and then a deadlift and a shoulder press, right? So here is kind of a total body situation here, right? Pretty simple stuff. If I did, let's say I'm doing 3 sets of 10 for each of these. Right. So if I did horizontal loading, I would move horizontally through my sets. So I would do my chest press and then I would rest. And then I would do my chest press and then I would rest. And I would do my chest press and I would rest. That's my final set. I'd move on to squats. That's moving across my sets and reps horizontally, right? Set 1, set 2, set 3. So we see an example of that here, right? Oh, of course, I was supposed to say vertical loading first. So we'll come back. Horizontal loading, right? Set 1, set 2, set 3. Then set 1, set 2, and set 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, that's horizontal loading. Now, I could also do vertical loading. And vertical loading is moving down the OPT from top to bottom. So what I would do is I would do my chest press for set 1. Then I would do my squats for set 1, my bent over row for number 1, deadlifts, shoulder press. Then I would go back to the top and do my chest press for set 2. Now you might be asking yourself, well, what's the difference here between vertical loading and circuit training, right? Like circuit training is doing that, right? Chest press, squats, bent over row, deadlift, shoulder press. But there's no rest involved. Circuit training would look like this. And you would say 0 seconds of rest, 0 seconds of rest, and put 60 seconds or however long at the very end. Vertical loading looks more like this, where you are able to take a rest in between each set, but you are, still moving sort of in a circuit style, right? And what that does, the benefit to this is that it adds a massive amount of rest in between your sets. So by time you are done with, if you moved from chest press through all of this, by the time you finish your shoulder press and you have to go back and do your chest press again, you will have rested a lot of minutes, right? You rested here, 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 and here. So by the time you get to that chest press, you're able to lift really, really, really heavy again. So vertical loading is a really effective method for maximum strength clients because it really does ensure that they get lots of time to rest and recover. So that's where you're alternating your body parts in each set. Set 1 for your chest, set 1 for your back, set 1 for your legs. Then back to set number 2 for your chest, back, legs, chest, back, legs, chest, back, legs, chest, back, legs, versus chest, 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 back, 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 legs, legs, legs. So does that make sense to everybody? Hopefully, hopefully I didn't move too fast on that one. All right. Oh, that's not it. Prep resistance training is the one I want. All right, so now what about our levels, right? Well, if your client is in the stabilization level, guess what? Looking at exercise selection, you are going to give your client we are going to use the word resistance stabilization exercises. Remember how the other day we had core stabilization, balance stabilization, and reactive stabilization. That's what went in the movement prep. Well, this is called the resistance section. So we are going to say resistance stabilization exercises, okay? So that's what you're going to give clients who are in the stabilization level. What does that mean? Well, resistance stabilization exercises are exercises that use unstable but controlled environments. So like we talked about earlier, standing on an RX pad, standing on a squishy box, standing on one leg, anything that's slightly unstable in order for you to develop stability and neuromuscular efficiency. Really good example is the stability ball chest press, right? You can see this is a very unstable surface. So this person has to balance while they're also doing their chest press, right? And that's exactly what we're going for. So clients who are in the stabilization level, if you pick a chest exercise, it's going to be a chest stabilization exercise. If you're picking a leg exercise, it's going to be a leg stabilization exercise. We're sort of using the word resistance as sort of a placeholder for whatever body part it is we're talking about. So now, again, we're starting to see a little bit of the difference in the OPT model, right? Like if you think about like what the movement prep section is, these are kind of like, it's your core. Your core is like a physical body part, but your balance and your reactive abilities, those are like concepts of athleticism, they're just related to like things that we need to be able to do. And really your core is part of that as well. That's why this is the movement prep versus the resistance section. Yeah, this is where we're training body parts. You want to make your legs stronger? Great. Let's do leg stable. Let's do leg stuff. You want to make your back stronger? Awesome. Let's do back stuff, right? Like these are body parts. These are like, they're kind of like concepts of athleticism, right? So clients in stabilization get body part stabilization exercises. Clients who are in the strength level, this is either phase 2, 3, or 4, right? Any of these phases, well, they're going to get resistance strength exercises, right? Resistance strength exercises are stable environments, exercises that involve stable environments that move your muscles through a full range of motion. So if in stabilization you were focused on, stability, in strength you're focused on moving through a full range of motion, heavy. That's really what it is. So we want to make sure it's a very stable environment so that you can lift heavy. The classic example here, instead of a stability ball chest press, is the old bench press. That is the sort of classic, right? And so, now you're on a very stable bench and you're using a bar, which is very stable. You don't even have your arms wiggling, like this at all. They're kind of locked into a bar. So that's the classic strength version of an exercise there. And then if your client's in the power phase, well, these are going to be explosive exercises. So you're going to do resistance power exercises, chest power, back power, leg power, right? These are exercises that focus on rate of force production. So instead of a bench press, now we're going to do a medicine ball chest pass. And so it's a really explosive, kind of throwing action here. I don't like this guy's demo. I remember this video, but, this is for the chest, but now it is super explosive, right? And so now that's a chest power exercise. So again, different levels of the OPT, different takes on exercises, and different takes on how to train those body parts. And that is the very large, very note heavy chapter 10. That may feel like a lot, but for those of you who have been through our other program design classes, I'm sure, this should feel pretty darn familiar by this point. Any questions, comments, or concerns today, guys? So far, we got one more PowerPoint, by the way. Sounds like I'm wrapping up. I'm not wrapping up. Any questions on chapter 10?
All good.
All good. Lorianne, how you feeling? Thomas, how you feeling? You're my two new guys.
Doing pretty good today.
Cool.
Thanks.
Yeah, it's good.
Awesome. I know that like with like the pyramids and like that stuff, that seems like a lot, and it is. Like there's a lot of notes in that PowerPoint. But like it's all the stuff that like we talk about again every single mod, and it's also all the stuff that like is very easy to look up, you know. But that's like some of the ways we talk about like variation. You know, what if you wrote a routine for your client and you kept it exactly the same? Like one of my favorite ways to do strength that I've kind of goofed around with this year is like I will do straight sets like for maximum strength training for a couple weeks. So I will do like week 1 will be like 5, you know, like 3 sets of 5, right? And then week 2 will be like 3 sets of 3, and then week 3 will be like 5 sets of 1, like 1 really heavy rep, you know. And then at the week 4, I will do like a reverse pyramid. Set 1 will be for 5, set 2 will be for 3, set 3 will be for 1. And that's kind of an interesting way that I've kind of goofed around with the idea of like, you know, improving my 1 rep max. And it was a really effective routine until I freaking pulled my hamstring. But, you know, that's, you know, I blended the concepts of straight sets eventually into sort of a pyramid system. That can be a way for you to change up your volume for that, you know, principle of variation that we talked about, right? Or principle of overload. All right, so last thing we got to talk about today is something that is very optional in the world of lifting, but I do recommend it. I think it's really fun, but we get into Olympic weightlifting. So Olympic weightlifting, you know, we want to sort of today talk about the rationale for, you know, how to use it and why to use it. Talk about like, you know, what it is, you know, what are the qualities that are necessary in order to be able to even do these lifts, proper technique, and then understand how to apply it to the OPT model. Because this is something that's not in your regular textbook. This is something that they only have in the sports book. And I think my computer is frozen. Can you guys still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, maybe it's just PowerPoint. There we go. All right. All right. So thank you. Let's take a look at Olympic lifting. So what is Olympic weightlifting? Well, Olympic weightlifting is actually a sport in the same way that like soccer, football, whatever, is a sport. It is just a sport that consists of 2 events. That's the entire sport. You know, like basketball, you got offense and defense, right? But you also have like a lot of positions on the field. There's shooting, there's guarding, you know, dribbling. It's kind of a lot of components. Olympic weightlifting, 2 things. It is the clean and jerk and the snatch. Okay, that's the entire sport. So if we look at the clean and jerk, that is this right here. So what's going to happen is he is going to clean the barbell from the floor to his shoulders, and then he is going to jerk it from his shoulders overhead. So pulling from the floor, this is the clean. Oh my God, video. Just lift the weight. This is the clean. And here's the jerk. So he did a traditional jerk. You can also do a split jerk if you wanted to. In the Olympics, both are actually an option. So there's the clean, and then a split jerk is where you go to a split stance. Both qualify. It doesn't, they actually have no restrictions on which one you're allowed to do in the Olympics, just whichever one you feel is more comfortable to you. And then there's also the snatch, which is pulling a barbell from the floor all the way up overhead. And that's the snatch right there. He caught that in a pretty high position. He didn't do much of a dip in his catch, but sometimes you'll see, you know, a snatch will be in like a full, very, 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 you know, low squat sometimes, depending on like what yours sort of looks like. Here's this guy again. So he's going to pull it all the way from floor. Yeah, he's doing a little bit of a lower catch and then catch it overhead. So that's the snatch. So that's the entire sport of Olympic weightlifting. Okay. It's the clean and jerk plus the snatch. Now, it is very popularized among athletes, but a lot of athletes can't necessarily even do this properly. This is some of the most form intensive, very specific. You need to be able to do it effectively in order to even have like a prerequisite before you can even do this. This can be some high risk exercise. So if you perform it improperly, you're only asking for an injury. Olympic weightlifting does still adhere to the principle of specificity, by the way. You know, a lot of times people think it's like, well, those are just like two very key movements that don't necessarily apply to my sport. But the thing is, it really does. Olympic lifts may not necessarily like directly apply to the sport that you're playing in terms of like what the lift looks like, but its qualities do still very much apply to things that improve basically every component of athleticism. There's a lot of core strength, there's a lot of power, and it moves through what is called the universal athletic position. And the universal athletic position is a big fancy way of saying squat. You know, like both of these movements move through like a hip flexion, or I'm sorry, they move through, we call it triple extension. Okay, triple extension is ankle plantar flexion, knee extension, and hip extension, which is a big fancy way of saying the squat, right? So if I even look up triple extension, you know, what you're going to see, running is an example of triple extension, right? That's hip extension, knee extension, ankle plantar flexion, right? Doing a kettlebell swing, triple extension, right? He's going from here to here. That's hip extension, knee extension, right? This one from here to here, and ankle plantar flexion. So when we say triple extension, we mean like a squatting action, and pretty much every sport out there, guys, involves some variation of a squat. So that's why this is called the universal athletic position. It's this triple extension movement. And because the snatch, which if I'm looking at triple extension, you can see a bunch of people who she's in the middle of either cleaning or snatching here, right? Plantar flexion, knee extension, hip extension, right? All three of those things are happening. The snatch and the clean and jerk are both performing those movements. Therefore, they are universally athletic movements, okay? And they're very good at improving your vertical jump, which, you know, vertical jumping is triple extension as well. So if we know that like vertical jumping is obviously very prevalent in a lot of sports as well, basketball, baseball, football, soccer even has some vertical jumping. You know, vertical jumping is just an effective tool for pretty much every sport out there. And that is where, again, Olympic lifting, very, very helpful. But like I said, friggin' risky stuff if you don't know how to do it properly. So prerequisites before we ever try to get our clients to do Olympic lifting, they need to have proper flexibility and proper mobility. Without those things, they should not be doing Olympic lifts, right? Ankle mobility is a big one. Without proper ankle mobility, they will not be able to catch properly. Remember, what happens when, actually, here we go. Toughest part of today's lesson, pop quiz, everybody. What happens when you have limited ankle mobility? Somebody tell me.
You're not stable. You don't have any balance, right?
True story. What else?
You're gonna ACL
Injury.
tear?
You are probably going to get injured. What's that, Thomas?
The ACL tear?
Oh, hey, actually, yeah, probably. a little overly specific, but yes. You guys are all absolutely correct. Poor balance, poor movement, likelihood of injury, right? Maybe even an ACL tear. But what do we see during a squat when someone has limited ankle dorsiflexion?
Or lean.
There it is. You nailed it. Excessive forward lean. We see somebody squat like this, right? Hips way too far forward instead of chest up. So now imagine trying to catch a freaking barbell. I don't even know if I'll be able to find a picture of this. Imagine trying to catch a barbell. Yeah, I probably won't be able to find a picture of this. With your chest leaning down towards the ground. You won't be able to do it, right? There'll be way too much pressure on your back, and you're probably just going to fall flat on your face, right? So that's just the ankle, right? So we need to have proper mobility in the entire lumbopelvic hip. Why did I move over here? We need to have proper mobility in the ankles, the lumbopelvic hip complex, the knees, the shoulders is actually another really big one. Without proper shoulder mobility, you won't be able to catch the bar. All of these things are really, really important for us, right? So you need to have proper flexibility. You need to have proper mobility. If you can't do any of that, you're not going to be able to do these movements. And then you also need to have proper stability. Remember, stabilization is our foundation for everything. So, you know, let's see here. Let's see if we can find a. I mean, we're definitely not going to see it from this guy. This guy's a freaking rock star. You know what? All right, here's the CrossFit Games. Guarantee we'll find an example here because these are all people who are just competing to get it done. I'm going to jump to sort of the end of it where they've been doing a lot of them. Trying to watch somebody here. Oof. All right, there we go. So perfect example. Hey, Rich Frowning. This guy's like the fittest dude ever. All right, that was pretty good. Like, let's see this guy right here, right? Oh man, this video is so long, it's really hard to go back slightly. This guy right here is actually killing it. So he comes up pretty strong. But you will see as he goes down, right? That's really good form. Like his knees are going out over his toes the right way. They're not squeezing inwards awkwardly. Maybe a little bit right there for just slightly, but like for the most part, this guy's crushing it. So he's got really good ankle mobility and he's got really good flexibility, especially in his hips, right? And then he gets the bar all the way up. So that was his clean. There's his jerk. You can definitely see he was struggling there. But he doesn't have any shoulder mobility problems either. I would say this guy's very stable and very mobile. Look at this guy back here, though. Look at this guy in the back right here. This guy's going to walk in the way, but he's about to go up. You can see a little bit of limited and then see his knees buckle in as he squeezed there. That shows a little bit of like limited stability. So good mobility and good stability. Little bit of limited stability there, right? Though his knees are kind of wobbling, right? Now watch this during his push. He really goes into a split jerk. See his knee cave in, and then he loses his balance, steps to the side. You should be moving straight front and back there. So this guy's struggling with stability, right? This guy's riding the struggle bus here, probably because I don't know how many reps they're doing for this event. He was probably good in the beginning, and now that's why I knew this video was going to be a good example. Because this is literally a competition where they're doing as many as they can. Now watch this guy right here. This guy is really trying to punch above his weight, and he is going to really struggle with his mobility. So he's going to clean. Now watch this. Barely lands in a squat. Look at how wide his stance is. He's going wider with his stance because he has limited mobility and he can't sit into his hips. And then look at this awkward angle in his shoulder. He has limited mobility in his shoulders as well. And then he gets back to kind of neutral here. And I'll bet this guy can still pull it off. Just because this guy, I'm assuming with such a tight upper body, he probably has plenty of upper body strength. We'll see. Ooh. Yeah, he got it. It's actually his jerk was pretty good. It's not terrible. So you can definitely see like that is his maximal weight for sure. Like that guy is struggling, you know? But he killed it. He got it done in the end. So that is, again, why we need stability and mobility, right? We need both of those things simultaneously. So you want to make sure that you are giving your client stability cues. If you do have, if you are doing Olympic lifting, right? You want to make sure that you are doing specific stability cues. That's why you see everybody in that video, they were all wearing weightlifting belts. Now there's sort of a common misconception in the weightlifting community about like weightlifting belts. People will see these and they will often think, oh, that's cheating, you know, that's creating stability in your back, that maybe because you have like a lack of core strength. That's actually not why people wear weightlifting belts. It is actually so that you have a physical cue to push out against. When you're wearing a weightlifting belt, you're not trying to like squeeze your abs as much. You're actually trying to brace your abs, which often involves pushing against that weightlifting belt. This is why we'll often cue people to do what's called the Valsalva maneuver when you're doing like heavy lifting. And you guys can experience the Valsalva maneuver right now. Take a big deep breath in, purse your lips together, and exhale as you're like just squeezing your lips. Go like that. If you breathe like that, you'll notice your stomach will pooch out and push really hard. That's activating your core. Valsalva maneuver is a really good way to focus on abdominal bracing. So you want to cue your client to do that bracing. That's going to keep their spine in a neutral position and protect them through this movement. And you also want to make sure that they are retracting their scapula. Your scapula should be set in place before you do any of this movement, so you don't have any shoulder rounding or anything like that. Obviously, proper posture is key. If your client doesn't have proper posture, again, they should not be doing Olympic lifts. Very necessary in order to effectively move through, you know, the clean and jerk positions. And we know that like posture, what does it come from? Well, it comes from flexibility, mobility, and neuromuscular control, which is a fancy way of saying stability, right? Like, so you need these two things in order to have this thing in order to be allowed to do these Olympic lifts. And when I say neuromuscular control, we're often talking about, you know, a proper firing sequence here. So, you know, neuromuscular control, this is something I kind of have a bad habit of during like my deadlifting, for instance. Like when I deadlift, you know, I will often have this kind of bad habit of starting with my upper body rather than moving my legs and upper body like simultaneously. So you'll see like, if I kind of go into this position here, you'll sometimes see I will jerk up like this and then do my legs. And that is an improper firing sequence. That is actually leading to a little bit of like decrease in the way that you're supposed to do that movement. You'll see some people will, you know, start with their squat and they'll kick their butt out in the beginning. You'll just see some awkward like ways that people sort of like go through their lifts. You'll see people who squat their deadlift. You'll see people who deadlift their squat. And basically like those are people who are either leaning forward too much or leaning up too much. You know, a lot of variations there. If we see those things with our clients, again, we want to make adjustments, right? We want to make sure that our client, you know, is moving the way that they're supposed to. Without that, no Olympic lifts, okay? If they can't squat properly, if they can't deadlift properly, if they can't overhead press properly, and honestly, if they can't do a good overhead squat either, and I don't mean the overhead squat that we talk about, not the overhead squat assessment, but the overhead squat lift, which is this here. If they can't get to depth in this position with a barbell, we should really not be doing Olympic lifts. Again, let's look at the examples here. Now that we've kind of talked about them so much, what is the snatch? Well, the snatch is an Olympic lift that involves pulling a barbell all the way from the floor up to overhead. Now there are variations. The classic, like I said, from floor to overhead, it's the snatch. Some people call it the power snatch, but it's, you know, the original version, they just call it the snatch. But there are things like the hang snatch, for instance. A hanging snatch would be, instead of starting with the barbell from the floor, you would start it just in your hands, maybe from just below the knees, and then pull straight up overhead. So that's a hang snatch. There's just variations of these lifts that you'll see out there. You know, you'll do a full catch, you'll do a half catch sometimes. But here is the classic snatch, like start position. It's basically the same as a deadlift, but a much wider grip. You need to have that wider grip in order to be able to hold your arms overhead in the catch position. Then the other lift is the clean and jerk. Clean and jerk is an Olympic lift consisting of 2 separate phases. You're going to pull from the floor to your shoulders, and then you're going to jerk it from your shoulders overhead. Again, there's a lot of variations here. There's the power clean, which again is kind of just your classic clean and jerk. So a power version would be from the floor, which is what the original is. There's the hang clean, which is just below the knees or maybe just below the hips. And then there's the jerk classic version, which, you know, like I said, in the Olympics, they'll allow you to do either version you want. So you can jerk like this, where basically you get this kind of intense arch in your back and barbell overhead, or you can do a split jerk, which is the type that I find is much more comfortable, where you go like this. And so you land and then you step your back leg forward. I'd say most people do the split version. And like I said, you could do any variation of this. You could do a hang, clean, split jerk. You could do a power, clean, classic jerk. There's a million variations. That's not true. There's 6 or 7 variations, but whatever combo you decide to do. So again, you're starting from the same position, except not as wide of a grip. So you can do just kind of a classic sort of deadlift grip here, and then pull that here. And you can catch it in whatever's comfortable as well, by the way. In the Olympics, for instance, they don't make you like, you know, catch it in a quarter or a half squat position or anything. Like sometimes you'll see, you know, people will go really, really low. So the strongest man right now, Olympic weight lifting, Lou. This guy here, I don't know how to say his last name, Lou Xingzhong, but this guy, this is the strongest dude. He did get hurt, which we're seeing here, but he came back really freaking strong. And is just a freaking animal. Pound for pound, probably the strongest person on the planet right now. Whew. It's one heck of a snatch. How much weight is that? Weight. Okay, so this guy weighs 178 pounds, and he can snatch 175 kilograms. That's not helpful. I need to convert that. 175 times 2.2. This 170 or 185 pound guy can pull 385 pounds up over his head. That is pretty freaking crazy. And then what is his clean and jerk weight? 199 pounds. So he can also clean and jerk 437.8 pounds. So that is a total, like if you put the 2 weights together, and that's actually what you get your medals for, that is a total of 379 kilograms. So this 178-pound dude can lift 833 pounds over his head 2 different ways. Pretty friggin' impressive stuff. He's the man. So those are your 2 major Olympic lifts, right? Now, obviously, we know that like I said, there's some variations here. You can do it on blocks. For instance, that can help you with like the hanging version. Sometimes you'll see people will pull from blocks like this, and then that's how you kind of teach yourself. If you're having trouble like developing power in like the upper body, just like the transition part, you can start from like blocks like this, which can help you kind of learn how to do that. So that's another variation. Pulling from here, that'd be like, this would be a hang clean, right? Because he's not all the way down the floor, he's pulling from like a block, right? So variations that are there. Now, obviously, there's also some lifts that you need to be able to like be pretty comfortable with before ever trying this stuff. Like I said, the back squat, right? AKA your classic barbell squat. That's a really big one, right? Literally just a barbell on your back. This guy's excessively leaning, but barbell on your back, squatting down, right? That is not a great demo. This is on the Strong Lifts website. That's crazy. But that's your classic. There's a, is that a pregnant lady doing this? Sure is. So yeah, something that looks more like this. That's your classic barbell squat. Then there's the front squat, which is a variation here, right? That's squatting with elbows up. You should be able to keep your elbows at parallel through the entire range of motion, but barbells resting on your collarbone. There's the overhead barbell squat, which we showed earlier. You want to be able to do this variation here, where you can squat down with barbell overhead. Deadlifting is obviously really good. That's that classic, you know, from the ground. She's kind of doing a little bit of a, I don't know, this is actually okay, but this is a little bit of a Romanian deadlift. She's kind of got her chest a little bit low. Conventional deadlift is chest a little bit higher versus Romanian, which is chest a little bit lower, hips further back. Sumo deadlifts, which is where you take your legs out super wide. There is a snatch grip deadlift, which is totally just the normal deadlift, except that you are going to take your grip really, really wide as if you were going overhead into a snatch position. Romanian deadlifts we just saw. There's a deadlift to calf press, which is actually really helpful for teaching you how to do like the clean and jerk. So basically you just do your deadlift and then afterwards you take yourself up to a calf raise. And then a little bit less translation here. The bench press may have some carryover. You know, the military press may have some carryover. That's your classic just shoulder press with a barbell. Push press will definitely have some carryover. That is, you'll notice, you're like, what the heck is the difference between this and the military press? Well, a military press, you do not use your legs at all. A push press is actually explosive. So in, you know, military press, I'd have a barbell in hand and I would literally push like this. Push press, I would actually do a little dip and drive. So the push press is a power movement. The military press is a strength movement. Both of them are probably very helpful for the clean and jerk. Then balancing things out, pull-ups are actually very helpful for creating scapular strength, and bent over rows are very helpful for helping with the pulling action. So this is sort of a working list. This is just something I put up here because the last time I taught this class, somebody asked. These are all the lifts that I think are helpful that assist in Olympic lifting development. So how the heck, where are you going to put this in the OPT? Oh, wait, actually, sorry, not there yet. When it comes to Olympic lifting or any of these lifts, you should always have a spotter. If you are spotting your client, especially on like the strength versions, military press, pull, push up, bench press, things like that. Here's how it works. If you're squatting or benching, you should have a spotter every single time. Olympic lifts, not so much, because you're probably going to be using bounce plates. You know, there's a difference between, bounce plates versus just regular plates. So bumper plates or bounce plates look like this. They are, you know, there's steel inside like you normally would see, but then they are literally surrounded by rubber. You know, when you hear somebody drop their plates at the gym, if it's a gym that has these type of plates, that person is a freaking jerk. But if they are dropping bumper plates, they are, you know, designed to be able to like drop and bounce. That's why they're all the same size. Like traditional plates, right? You have different sizes, right? You have like, you know, some smaller, well, that's not a picture. You have smaller ones, you have larger ones. And that's why they're not designed. The 45s are the big ones, right? Iron plates, literally, they're heavier or based on going like this. Rubber plates, not so much. They are all the same size. They are designed to be dropped. That's what we were saying, you know, that's what we were saying in, you know, you shouldn't come out of a snatch. You should drop it. You know, let's see somebody actually do this. So these plates are, you know, they are designed to be dropped. You know, the floor should be specific. The plates should be specific. But he's going to do it, and he's going to drop it, right? So that doesn't necessarily require a spotter, but things like the bench press, things like the barbell squat, those should absolutely have a spotter. And the way that you spot someone, guys, you should always use a two-handed position so you can get over this way and this way. So that creates like a closed system when you're helping someone with the bench press, for instance. And how do you know when to bail someone out? Like if someone is benching, it is the second it goes in the unintended direction. So if they're going like this and it dips this way, bail them out. If they're squatting and they're coming up and they go back down, bail them out, right? That's when you know to step in. If they really slow down, that's not when you step in. They may still get through that lift. It's the second you see them dip in the wrong direction. So there's definitely going to be some common compensations here. Trunk flexion, for instance, in the power clean, you'll see people who will like lean forward. That's often caused by weak core muscles, right? So again, cue those stabilizing core muscles. You'll also see excessive lumbar extension, like that anterior pelvic tilt. This is usually caused by like weak spinal muscles. Again, look, the cueing is the same. Cue the stabilizers, right? If your client is leaning, you know, if they're doing trunk flexion or excessive trunk extension, both of those weak core muscles. So cue them to brace their core before they go into their lift. Improper knee tracking, right? Thomas, you were talking about ACL tears earlier, right? If they are wobbling their knees like crazy, that can cause like a knee tear. That's usually due to lack of mobility. So oftentimes we need to work on hip mobility while we're doing that. And then another one that you will see is the excessive lean, and that's usually caused by tight calf muscles. So when it comes to the OPT template, you know, and we are applying this, your snatch is the most, by the way, this is the one thing that you may see on homework, or I think it's in the final exam in this class. The snatch is the most powerful exercise in the world of weightlifting. So in terms of like power development of all stuff that exists, the snatch is the most powerful. It has the highest level of force with the most velocity. So it has the biggest power requirement. So if you have an athlete who's trying to develop their power, maybe the snatch is probably our best exercise. It's immediately followed by the clean and jerk. That is the second most powerful. Then probably like a deadlift, you know, maybe a kettlebell swing, something like that. But typically, where are you going to apply this with your clients? Usually, for the most part, guys, it's only going to be used in phase 4. That's your max strength phase. Phase 5, that's your power phase. And quote unquote, phase 6, that is your sport specific training. Now, when it comes to the max strength phase, typically you are focusing on variations. So barbell squat variations, deadlifting variations, pulling and pressing variations. And then in the power phase, that's where you're getting into the snatch, the clean and jerk, all of their derivatives, you know, hang, snatch, hang, jerk, whatever. Hang jerk, there's no hang jerk. Hang, snatch, split jerk, things like that. But in the power phase, basically that's where these most apply. So phase 5 and phase 6, so power and sport specific power, those are the two main phases where you're going to apply this. When it comes to max strength, you're probably going to use some of these variations instead that will have some carryover to your Olympic lifts, but are not directly related to Olympic lifting. And then I put a little note in here for those of you who have been through our program design classes already, Jerica, Cody, Bay, you don't need to pair Olympic lifts with another exercise. So I know in power, we do the whole superset thing. Lorianne Thomas will talk about that later. Not for these. These they're all by themselves. So hopefully that was kind of an interesting introduction to Olympic lifting. Like I said, it's a very advanced form of training, but it can be really fun. I haven't done this stuff in quite some time. I used to do it back in the day. It was a little, you know, when I was a little more interested in this kind of stuff. Kind of stepped away from it for a few years. Have been considering getting back into it lately. You know, it is kind of fun. But you know, it's very sports specific, you know, and it's like, do I really want to dedicate a lot of time to this, you know? So I haven't really stepped back into the world in the last few years, but any questions or comments today, guys? How y'all feeling?
Feel good.
Feeling good.
Cool. All right, guys. Well, that's about all I got for you today. Kill the recording here.